You would not believe how many writers I meet who tell me they don't read. That just blows my mind. You cannot learn to write a book if you don't read books, and read a lot of books in a wide variety of genres. Let me tell you about the lessons I learned from reading thousands of books over the years. One controversial thing before I start. Life is too short for bad books, and I do not waste my time on bad books. If a book sucks to me, now it may be something that you love or somebody else loves, but if I think it sucks and it doesn't grab me, I don't read it. I give it away. That said, that brings me to the first lesson. People will overlook a lot if you have a book that's full of twists and turns and has some degree of connection with the reader. I just read a book called The Sculptress that was sent to me by one of the viewers. Thank you very much for that. It's a lot like Riley Sager's The Last One Left, which I really loved. So I was excited to start The Sculptress. It is an older book. It was written quite a while ago, and it's an Edgar Award winner. So right there, I figured, okay, it's got to be good because it has that. And when I first started it, it had some good twists. It had something that really grabbed me right away. I didn't expect a couple of the things that happened early in the book. And then about a third of the way in, it had some stuff that I didn't like, and I almost gave up on it. But I kept thinking about those twists. I kept thinking about the fact that it was an Edgar Award winner. I'm like, you know what? I'm going to stick with it. It just had, to me at least, an uneven middle where I didn't really like a couple of the characters, and I wasn't sure I wanted to stick with them. But I'm glad I did, because the author pulled it out of the fire and really pulled it all together by the end of the book. So I was glad that I read it by the time I got to the end. There are some things I would have done differently, but that doesn't mean that she did them wrong. It just means that I would have done them differently. Overall, I overlooked that because there was enough twists and turns and enough characterization that I really did get into it and finished the book. Another book that did that for me was Little Heaven by Nick Cutter. I loved The Troop, probably one of the best horror novels I've read in a while. Little Heaven, not so much. It had a part in the middle that I just was like, I don't know. But the characters were so richly drawn, and there were so many twists and turns and so many things that he had set up in the beginning that I really wanted to see how they worked out, that I stuck with it. And I was glad that I did, because it turned out to be a really good book. But doesn't mean that it's not a good book. It just means that Nick did enough things in that book to keep me with it and keep me as a reader, because I am definitely going to buy his next one. That book also illustrates my next point. You can pull off some really unlikable characters if they have depth and they have reasons for acting the way that they do. Little Heaven is about three mercenaries who go and kill people because they're paid to. That would normally not be people that I would relate to or care about. Nick started off the book with a scene that hooked me into one of the main character's stories in a huge way, and allowed me to forgive some of what he was doing because I had seen another side of that character already. That is the key to creating characters that readers love, even if they do despicable things. The Perfect Marriage by Geneva Rose is a very clever take on that, where the main character seems very likable, and then there's some twists in there where you're like, I'm not so sure. And then a character that you think you're supposed to like turns out to have some things that you don't like. A whole bunch of twists. It was great how she created likable, unlikable characters and yet kept me glued to the page. Another book that did that exceptionally well and left me emotionally wrung out at the end was Black River Orchard by Chuck Wendig. That's a book about a father who runs an apple orchard. He has a great relationship with his daughter in the beginning. He becomes evil because of this orchard. It's a horror novel. It was a very gradual and very deep and rich way of taking this character who was very likable and turning them into somebody unlikable so that you were rooting for the good guys to win. What you need to do is really layer your characters. People are complicated. We have traits that are good and bad. Those traits, however, and the reason why those traits are there, are really crucial to creating characters that have richness and depth and that we can relate to. I talk about this a little bit in my point of view video. You can create a character that everybody else should hate, like Tony Soprano.
Come on, Jimmy, even a broken clock is right twice a day.
But because you give them layers and reasons why they act the way they do, the reader begins to root for them. Tony Soprano is a classic example of this, where his mother is so horrific to him that you actually start to feel bad for him, even as you see him run somebody over with his car. Like, he does really reprehensible things. But because you see that vulnerability and that trauma that he was put through, you're like, well, I still don't want him to die. Like, I like him. That kind of complicated, layered character is not an easy thing to pull off. It really isn't. But it does create the kind of book that people talk about. If you're creating a character who is evil or does bad things, then what you want to do is go back and look at their history. What shaped them? What made them into this person? And can you make that something that is relatable and understandable and maybe even sympathetic? What that delivers as a result of creating all of these layers is a character that is complex, that keeps the reader on the edge of their toes, really debating, should I be sympathetic to this person? Should I not? Little Heaven, Black River Orchard, both great examples of how to do that. The most crucial ingredient in creating a book that people will read from cover to cover is good characterization. Lots of people might say, well, it's plot. Hunt for Red October, all about this Russian trying to defect. But it was about the Russian commander who just wanted to go fishing and have an ordinary life that people related to. That's what they loved about Hunt for Red October. The car chases are great, but if people don't care about the characters, they're not going to be invested in the car chases. You can write a book that doesn't have a huge action plot and have good characterization and still pull it off. The Impossible Fortress, for instance, by Jason Rekulak, it's his very first debut book, which is a YA type story. The main characters are teenage boys whose main goal is to basically pull off a heist to get a copy of the edition of Playboy where Vanna White was in. You would think that those would not be characters I would relate to. But what Jason Rekulak did so well was create these three-dimensional people who had been the outsider in middle school, who had been made fun of, who had been really struggling to find their place in society, who was experiencing their first love. All of those things that we can all relate to made the main characters of The Impossible Fortress absolutely brilliantly. Another thing I realized in reading all these books is that not every book is a winner, and that's okay. When you've written a ton of books, and I've published 87, I'm working on my 88th right now, not all of them are my proudest moments because I was going through things in my life, or I just never really got into that book, or I was pressured on a deadline, whatever. There's a million reasons why not every book comes out as your best. And that's okay. If you deliver a good reading experience for the reader, or you've got some books that really knocked it out of the park, they will stick with you. I love Stephen King. I've loved virtually every one of his books. I picked up Never Flinch. I was super excited, and it was like I liked it, but I didn't love it. I read it because I liked it, and I did want to see how it turned out, but I wasn't raving about it like I have with other books of his, like Duma Key. It was okay, but it wasn't my favorite, and that's okay. Not every book you write, not every page you write, not every scene you write is going to be amazing. That's okay. As long as you are regularly delivering strong characterization and a pretty compelling plot, the reader is going to stick with you. That said, the opening of your novel is more crucial today than at any other point in reading history. There is a lot of different things clamoring for the reader's attention. You have to give them a reason to avoid all those things, shut them off, put their phone aside, and stick with your book, which means your opening has to grab them right away. I cannot tell you how many times I rework an opening, even if it's just tweaking one word versus another. I literally just changed one word in my opening today, and I will probably come back and do that a million times before I finally release the book, because I know that if I don't grab them on that first page, I'm never going to grab them. So all that brings me to the most important thing that I have realized about these books over the past year. Standing out means digging deep. For me to try an author who is new to me, like Geneva Rose, Janelle Brown, Ashley Elston, Jason Rekulak, a lot of people that I have read for the first time over this last year, the books had to really stand out. And for me to talk about them on the channel, they have to stand out even more because it becomes a book that I use as a teaching lesson. Those authors dug deep with characterization. They had really cool twists that I didn't expect or see coming. And I marveled at the amazing way that they put the scene or the paragraph together to the point where I was just like, wow, this makes me want to try harder to be a better author. Those are the people that should hold you to a higher standard, that should make you say, I'm going to really work hard to make this next book even better. I'm going to work really hard to make this opening amazing. I'm going to work really hard at going deep with my characterization. That's what those kinds of books should do, and that's what you should learn from the reading that you do. I encourage you to read widely and read often and read in a variety of formats so that you are getting a bunch of different experiences, different voices, different levels of characterization, and different types of so that you begin to see these same commonalities. That it doesn't matter if you're reading a fantasy, a sci-fi, a mystery, a YA, whatever you are reading, if you can relate to the characters, and if you can really connect with those characters as if they are friends, as if they are people that you know super well, or even better, as if they are the insides of you, right there regurgitated on the page, that's what makes a book that people talk about, remember, and become lifelong fans of. So let's talk about it. Tell me in the comments, what have you learned from the books that you have read? What has been the common thread that you have seen through all of the books that you have chosen and read over the past year that keeps you coming back for more? What has kept you from page one to the very end? What are those common themes or elements that really hooked you? Because those are the things that you need to learn from and apply them to your own book so that your book can end up being one featured on a channel like this where people are saying, oh my gosh, you totally have to read that. I have a free handout linked below that is all about how to go deep with your characters and really bring that stuff to life. And check out this video here if you want to know what goes into a compelling scene and how to fix some of the mistakes that you might be making with yours.